أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. On this day, which is the birth of Fatima Zahra salawatullahi alayha, I've been asked to speak a few words about the importance of hijab and the works of al-marhum, my father Sheikh Mahdi al-Amli in Sydney and in Australia, and in bringing the Islamic and Shia faith and establishing the Shia faith within Australia. Within this country, which is a country that was almost, you could say, founded on godlessness, and many of the people who migrated, many of the Arabic people, and the Lebanese people who migrated to this country, migrated due to economic purposes and security purposes because of the countries that they were living in. Now, not many people would obviously migrate to this country due to religious purposes, and so therefore there was a large portion of the migrant Muslims whom were Shia but had lost their identity as they had come to this country, like I said, for economic or security purposes. And so they had lost their identity and lost their faith. And upon the request of the teacher of my father, Sheikh Muhammad al-Faqih, who is based in Haris in Lebanon, rahmatullahi alayhi, he was a marja', and he requested of Sheikh Mahdi rahmatullahi alayhi to come to Australia to guide and to establish the Shia faith. Now, upon arriving in this country, obviously he was met with great resistance. That people in this country, in Australia, was known, the Australian government or the authorities that be at the time were known for their strong beliefs, racial beliefs, believing that obviously blue-blooded Australians or blue-blooded Englishmen were better than the rest of the world. And in fact, with many of the things that you notice, even after World War II, when the Japanese tried to join the United Nations, Australia was one of the countries who rejected Japan joining for the purpose that they said that these people, although the delegation that was sent from Japan spoke perfect English and were educated in Cambridge and Oxford, the Prime Minister at the time said, I didn't understand a word they were saying because of the degree of racism. Now, even during the apartheid in South Africa, the Australian government was someone who supported the South African government during that period, obviously in line with the political motivations. However, this is just to lay a background of what it was with the foreigners. However, with the Muslims it was even worse. People would come here, and due to a psychological condition known as inferiority complex, and inferiority complex is basically when you feel that they make you feel that your culture or your belief system is lesser than theirs, that they are much better than you. And so people, due to this inferiority complex, tried to assimilate with the foreigners. Therefore, the first thing they did when they came to this country is they removed their hijab, because they thought their hijab was a symbol of backwardness, a symbol of primitiveness, and they thought that to show that they are advanced, then let us remove this hijab. And people would see whose, for example, they would compete between each other, whose, for example, wife or daughter would wear less and less clothing, and this would be for them a symbol of status. It would be common for them to try and assimilate by drinking alcohol. It would be common for them to try and assimilate with so many things that, in fact, when my father first came here, may Allah's mercy be upon him, he saw people smoking in the holy month of Ramadan, in Shahr Ramadan. They were smoking and eating, and he said to them, "How can you smoke and eat in it is Shahr Ramadan? You should be fasting." They said, "There is no God here." And he says, "This is strange. No God in Australia, but is there death?" And they said, "Yes, there's death in Australia." So therefore, he answered their question very quickly, that if you have found this utopia, this paradise where there is no end and you can live the way you would like to live, then do as you please. As the man who asked Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam when he said, I want to sin, and he said, then find a universe other than Allah's universe to sin. And so therefore these people had thought they had found this. Now this is the sort of struggle Sheikh Ali Mehdi rahmatullah alayhi had to endure, a struggle against these people who had forgotten and lost their identity, their Islamic identity, their Islamic heritage, and their true purpose of existence. So particularly with this, with the Faطمية Crescent, Al-Hilal al-Fatimi, في Australia, this group of religious and devoted people who have gone together to try and bring back the hijab, so to speak, reintroduce to the hijab this identity of the Muslims that has been lost. The way that my father worked to try and reintroduce this lost heritage and lost identity and this obligation in Islam was to lead by example. As the prophets and the imams, you see that many of them, it wasn't the actual institutions that were built that made Islam what it is today. However, it was the fact that they led by example, that every time that you would move away, you could always turn back, for example, to the Imam and see that the actions of the Imam is what made the religion what it is. In the same way, my father, may Allah's mercy be upon him, when he came to this country, he led by example. So some things people thought that were maybe far out, in the sense that he had 4 daughters and nobody was wearing hijab in this country. He would make my sisters wear hijab at the age of 6, some at the age of 5. And people say, aren't they too young to wear hijab, 5 and 6? And he says to them, this is when you let them wear it. Not you wait till they're 15 years old, say now it's wajib upon you. She won't wear it anymore. She's not used to it. She's used to wearing different things. And so therefore this seemed like it was against the grain and people were shocked. Say, Islam doesn't even say this. Islam doesn't say this when you're talking about limits, about hudud. But when we're not talking about limits, we're speaking about raising. We're speaking about raising a generation who requires this Islamic identity. This is where it begins, at the grassroots level. And so therefore he led by example. Wherever he went in the street, he would wear the full Islamic dress. And you could imagine in the 70s in Australia, don't forget, just as a small bit of history, you're talking in 79, in 67. So we're talking only 12 years ago, before my father came to this country, or even less, 11 years ago, before I was even born. 1967 is when Australia stopped the White Australia policy, which meant that nobody that was other than a white-skinned Caucasian could migrate and come and live in this country. And here you have this man, who was somebody who was raised in Lebanon, who spent most of his life in Iraq, studying in Najaf, under the likes of Sayyid al-Khu'i, rahmatullahi alayh, Sayyid Shaheed Baqir al-Sadr rahmatullahi alayhi, these sorts of people, somebody who spent every day of his in the maqam of Imam Ali alayhi salam, coming to this country and then dressing in that manner, and people obviously stood against this, and they were very strongly against this. However, he kept this movement because he knew that if he takes off one part of his clothing, then the hijab will not upstand in this country without a doubt. And so therefore he led by example, the example of himself, the example of his daughters, to ensure that the hijab and modesty was brought back, to allow people to have pride in their identity. That on the contrary, if you leave your identity, this is where you will become humiliated and debased. That it's a form of pride that we have this Islamic heritage and this Islamic identity and require this Islamic identity. These are the sort of challenges that he coped with, and the core point here is that we need to lead by example, number one. Number two, we need to understand what our heritage is about, what hijab and modesty is all about. We sometimes in this day and age, we talk about Islam getting with the times, and we look at advancement as just passing of time. If advancement is passing of time, then the best of us should be the oldest of us. The oldest man or oldest woman in the world should be the best, the most intelligent. Why? Because they have spent more time on this earth. And this is clearly something or a concept that is incorrect. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, "And akramakum 'inda Allah atqakum," that the most pious of you are the ones who are the most honorable in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is what weighs on importance. Our faith, our religion, our way of life, this is our source of pride. And this is the way my father began to establish this, and he was a man of the people. That he left this world, when he died, he didn't own a property to his name. whatever clothes he had were the clothes that he basically had on his back. Islamic clothing that he donated overseas. What was left was the ideology and the heritage that he had created. Every Islamic center that has come upon here, that has been established in Sydney, or in many of the eastern coast cities such as Melbourne, or South Australia in Adelaide, these places all turn around and say that if it wasn't for the help of your father, we would have never got to the way, or the position, or the place that we had. And this is the way that he went about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'll just finish on this note, gives us a great example in the Holy Quran, when he commands Nabi Ibrahim salawatullahi alayhi wa nabiyina wa alayhi salam, and Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, when Allah commanded him وَأَذِّن لِلنَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ, that he says to him that call unto the people to come to the Hajj. And Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, at the time when he was calling unto the people to come to the Hajj, there was no people there. That he was in وَادٍ غَيْرَ ذِي زَرْعٍ, that he says that I am in this valley that is so barren that it can't carry or hold, or it has no fertility. However, he still called. And he went ahead with this action, and he obeyed the command of Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it grow. In fact, that today, these brothers who are from this group that has started this movement, Hayya ala al-Hijab, the call unto hijab, I think none of them have ever met my father in person, in all honesty. However, they heard about his movement and the actions that he took, and this is the important thing, that if you do the right thing with the correct intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it grow. وَمَا كَانَ لِلَّهِ يَنْمُو. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our deeds. Inshallah, I've shed some light on the origins of Shiism in this country, although in brief, and specifically the importance of reinvigorating and re-enlivening the hijab, the Islamic identity, and modesty being our culture. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة وأهدى ثوابها إلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات، وبالخصوص إلى روح نهدي ثوابها إلى روح الشيخ نهدي العاملي، وأموات المؤمنين والمؤمنات جميعا تسلكها الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.